Hi and welcome back. My name is Camille, and in this tutorial, we are going to do the final step in the mixed reality series and do a little bit of post work. We're going to be learning what render settings to use on Cinema 4D, how to stitch your final render in After Effects, how to mask and clean up your scene, and how to do some final polishing to really try and sell the reality part of mixed reality. Let's start off by opening our Cinema 4D project that we were working on in our previous lesson. If you need to pull it up again, the full folder with all assets we will be needing will be in the link below. Now after we open up our Cinema 4D project file and everything in our scene looks good, we are all ready to render. The first thing we are going to do is turn off our background over here in our objects window. Now we can see our object and its shadow on top of an alpha channel, a fully transparent background. Here we can do a double take and make sure the whole video is good and is playing back well. If you scrub through your full timeline here, you can see your 3D object move and is interacting with the light that we place in the scene. Now we are going to click the render settings button right here and make sure our render is set to Octane Render. And under that, let's go to Output to see our custom settings. Here we can put in the dimensions you would like to use. For this one, we are just going to put in 2160 by 3840 since our original footage had these dimensions. Let's also go back to our project file and press Ctrl D and make sure our project settings frame rate line up with our output settings. Now that this all looks good, let's make sure our frame range is set to all frames and that all 323 of our frames will be rendered in this area here. You can also, of course, switch it up if you would like to only render a certain portion of your timeline. Then you can just switch this to manual and manually type in the specific frames you would like to render. Now everything in this window should be good. Let's head on over to save, and beside the blank space here, click on the ellipses. Let's create a folder for all of our renders and call this PNG Render 1. Let's change the format to PNG and switch the depth to 16-bit. The higher the bitrate, the wider the color range and detail accuracy. So if your object is not too detailed and you have a bit of a slower computer or processor, you can just keep this at 8-bit. A really important part in this section is to click on the box beside Alpha Channel. This will render your scene with the alpha background. For some other projects, we might want to head to the Octane Render window right here, where we can render cryptomats and other auxiliary, beauty, and post passes. But for this class, we could just leave this part out. Now that we've put in all of the proper render settings, we can click on this little gear button in the live viewer once again. Now, I usually use path tracing, especially for mixed reality, since we want to render images and lighting as realistic as possible. I usually do a wide variety of sample rates depending on the details of your 3D objects and scenes. For this one, 250 sample rate will do, since there's not too many details on the giant cookie. Now let's go down here and also make sure Alpha Channel is checked, and let's just untick the Keep Environment part. Now that we've done all of that, we are finally ready to hit render, which is the button right here. Go ahead and click that button, you deserve it. After being extremely patient, we finally have our PNG sequence. Let's go ahead and open After Effects and open our original track project file. Then let's drag our PNG folder sequence into our project tab. Now let's right click and make sure it's 24 frames, and if not, let's interpret the footage to 24 frames. If we simply drag our clip to our track timeline, we can finally see our 3D object in the scene. Now we're almost there, but if you see these pylons in the street, they're intersecting with our 3D object when it rolls by. We definitely don't want it to be showing that, as it's a noticeable flaw and it makes our shot looks less realistic. So we see that we have two pylons, one near the beginning of the shot and one close to the end of the shot. Let's get rid of this by masking our shot and using After Effects Content Aware tool. Okay, so it's masking time. And first we're gonna go to the first frame of our shot with the pylon in it. So let's just make sure that this is clicked. And now we're gonna want to zoom in because it's a little hard to see. So you can either do that if you have a mouse with the, your scrolling button, or if you have a trackpad, you can just do your double fingers and zoom in, or whatever setting you have for zoom in on your trackpad, or you can just go over here and zoom in this way as well. The way we can navigate through our frame is by holding down spacebar, and now you can see that we can move around the frame. So now let's make sure again this is our shot is clicked, and let's head over here to the pen tool or G. And if you still can't see it, you can zoom in, and again spacebar, and let us try to outline this pylon as accurate and as close and clean as possible. Now there are other ways of doing this. There's also rotoscoping, but I just wanted to do it this way right now because there are two pylons and this isn't necessarily in the shot the whole time, and I'm just trying to avoid complicating roto as much as possible. Usually I roto when the object is in the frame the whole time, but this is not. So now what we're gonna do is press on the mask and just right click and click on track mask. Now we are just gonna play that forward and make sure that our mask stays on the pylon the whole time. Now it generally does a great job, but for something like this that goes out of frame, it usually stops and stays in the frame even when the pylon is not in there. So now let's press on our mask again, and we're just gonna drag this over out of our frame here since our pylon is now out of the frame. So now in order for us to check if that actually looks accurate, let's subtract this mask. We're just gonna have to drag this back and make sure it accurately represents where our pylon is. Now, if we just move forward in the timeline, so again, control right to move forward on your timeline, we now see, let's do none again just to see. So our pylon's just still a little bit in the shot, so let's just keep this here, the mask here. And again, in order to navigate around your window, just press spacebar and drag with your mouse or your trackpad. And so now our pylon's fully gone. We're gonna have to make sure this mask is gone out of the shot. Let's just drag it over here. So this is completely wrong. Let's just drag this all the way out of the shot. Again, press on mask to make sure that you're clicking on it. And just gonna have to play around with these settings and make sure frame by frame that your mask is good to go. Our pylon is not really seen, so let's go back to the next frame that has our pylon, which is right here. And I'm just gonna go to a frame where it fully has the pylon already so we can properly place our mask in there, back in there. Double check again throughout your whole timeline that you don't see any of the pylon left. That should be good. Okay, now let's move on to the other pylon, which is this one right here. And we're just gonna do the exact same thing. Now we're gonna do another mask here. And just try to be as close to the pylon as possible. I usually just like leaving a little bit of space because it actually does better with a track instead of it being too close, which is also something we can expand when we're actually content aware filling. And to see what we have done, let us do subtract. Okay. Actually, we're not going to do that yet. Let's right click, track mask, and now we are going to press that play button. And it did a good job since there's literally only 10 frames. If it didn't do a good job, I would hate After Effects. Okay, and now let's press backwards to also fill up the rest of this shot. Going backwards. Oh. And again, I actually like slowing it down when it's about to go out of frame since the mask just stays in the shot. And now we're gonna go frame by frame again. Press away from it and mask. Press the mask and then press V. Hold down the V. And now let's go frame by frame and fix that. And now that is fully out of the shot. And let's just track it back. And there we go. Now we should have both of our masks ready to content aware fill. Okay, and now we're just gonna go over here right under it to content aware fill. Now we can just press object, and we're gonna do the entire duration since there are intervals in between as well. And finally, click on generate fill layer. This might take a bit of time once again. Everything in this realm requires patience, so we shall practice it once more. Now that we've filled those pylons out, we can bring our footage back in again and see that our object now fits in very nicely to the scene, without any obvious flaws and obstructions in the background. There is one last cherry on top to blend our giant cookie in our shot. For some shots, we usually need to blend the objects in better, but this already looks pretty good. In other cases, we would slap on a color corrector and try to blend it in with the background, or what we could also do is put on a tint effect under color correction like this, and map the black pin drop tool to the darkest part of the frame, and the white pin drop tool to the brightest part of the frame. Now we can also add an adjustment layer here and add a bit of color grade if you just add on the Lumetri color effect, and play around with some settings. We can add a bit of glow just to give it a final little extra blending touch. The color grade is also something you can do in Premiere Pro if you prefer to do that instead. After we blend everything together, let's hit that save button once again. We can finally render this as a ProRes file by selecting QuickTime. Let's save this file under renders, then MOVs. Then let's go ahead and hit that render button. Now that we have our final video export, all we need to do is add some SFX on Premiere Pro, and we finally have our mixed reality shot. The blood, sweat, and tears does pay off after all. I hope you learned something from all this series of tutorials. Feel free to leave comments and suggestions on what else you would love to learn. My name is Camille, and it was great showing you guys a little bit of the mixed reality world. Until next time.